Welcome. I'm James Milan, and we are here with Ken Donnelly, who is the Democratic candidate for state senator for the 4th Middlesex District, which covers Arlington, Billerica, Burlington, Lexington, and Woburn. Ken, thanks for participating.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Before we begin, let's review the format of the interview. This will be a live-to-tape interview, and that means no edits once we begin. There was no pre-screening of questions, and the answers will be strictly limited to 2 minutes each. We will start with a 1-minute opening statement from the candidate, and after the questions, we will conclude with a 1-minute closing statement. Mr. Donnelly, you have 1 minute.
Thank you,
for
Jim.
your opening statement.
It's been a privilege for me to be able to serve the 4th Middlesex District since 2009. Been able to do many things, enjoyed my time there. I think some of the more important issues that we've been able to deal with is the workforce training part, and we've done a lot of work on education issues and other issues that help a lot of different families. I think very proud of our, when we did the minimum wage just recently. That was a very important piece. So when I got into this and I decided to run for office, I wanted to run to make a difference and a meaningful difference in people's lives. And I think that we've done that. I think that government is important to make sure that we help people at the bottom level. And we're doing that in many different ways. We have a long ways to go. We find that wage inequality in this state is still a major issue.
Thanks. We're going to move right on into the
Great.
questions, and I hope you won't mind if I remind you that there's a 2-minute time limit to be strictly observed. First question is, why are you running for re-election as a state senator?
Again, I think I said that when I ran originally, I wanted to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. I think that we need to have a voice in having come from a working background. Being a firefighter for 35 years, I think I bring a perspective of someone that has worked hard to try to raise a family, and my goal is to make sure we make it at least easier for people to attain middle class and to be able to raise families and provide for them the same opportunities I had in raising my children in the town of Arlington. So that's why I'm running, and that's why I continue to run. As I said before, we have areas where it's just been so difficult for people in the middle class to be able to make it. We see the cost of health care continues to rise, and in some cases is unaffordable for middle class when you're looking at co-payments and high deductibles in other areas. We want to make sure that the minimum wage piece, everybody not only gets a minimum wage, but a living wage. I've been proud to be able to represent issues like being the chief sponsor to make sure that the security guards, actually we have a prevailing wage for security guards, that we help organize home health care workers, that they have a living wage, helping in the MBTA janitors to try to make sure that they have living wages. We need to make sure that people that go to work every day have the opportunity to raise their families and be able to provide for those very important issues. And that's not happening right now. We have too many people in this state and in this country go to work and work 1 and 2 jobs and still don't have enough to live, make a living wage. And that's what I think is extremely important, and we have to make sure that we continue to provide those for our
Thanks
citizens.
very much. Next question is, could you give us 2 examples of your accomplishments during the 2013-14 state legislative session?
Yeah, one of them was when we did the economic development bill. I was able to put in $6 million for the Workforce Competitive Trust Fund. And what that does is it allows people to get training, low-income workers to get training. And again, as I said, we need to make sure that we give everybody those opportunities to get to where we are, to come to the middle class. And the only way we do that is through workforce training and making sure people have the skills. So I was very proud of the fact that we did that. Another piece that I worked on is when we did the bond bill, transportation bond bill. I was able to put in an amendment that made sure that not less than 300 low-income minority workers we're giving the ability or the opportunity to be on the workforce apprenticeship training programs, so that we could start reaching into the inner cities and into those communities where we have low wage, minority, and women, and give those people the opportunities to be able to get into the building trades, or transportation, or building the roads and bridges and other areas and give them those opportunities. So, and then there was so many other different bills that I've worked on. I was proud of the fact that I worked very closely on the education bill that we just did, and actually defeated the expansion of charter schools.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much. And on the flip side of that, could you give us 2 examples of initiatives that did not get done during this particular legislative session that you might intend to work on if elected in the future?
Again, I have to go back to the the workforce training is a very important piece that we've been working on, and we're going to continue to make sure that we have the money that is needed in those areas. I've been working on trying to get more money into both the community colleges and higher ed. Even though we've made some gains, we haven't made enough gains in those areas. I think that when we look at affordable health care, we need to make sure that the health care is affordable. We've been working on some of those areas and haven't been able to get everything that we'd like to get done. And there's a lot of different areas where I think that as the economy is starting to get better, we can do more, but there is a lot of things that we still have to do.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And what are the biggest issues facing the towns and cities you represent, and what policy priorities would you support to address those?
Yeah, I think the biggest priority is, in a piece that I've been very involved in, is transportation. And the major issue, it's kind of different areas, different problems for different areas. I'd say Arlington, the biggest problem they have is that their ability to grow is limited. Mm-hmm. They don't have the space. So their tax rate is based on 95% residential, 5% commercial. Unlike some of my other areas, Burlington has a tremendous tax base because they have so much commercial property, along with Woburn, Billerica, and Lexington. But their challenge is the transportation, making sure that they can, 128 is a mess in the morning and in the evening. They need better public transportation. We need to figure out how we can move people through those corridors without the cars. Mm-hmm. We need to get the cars off the road. So there's different challenges in those communities. Arlington is one challenge because of the limited amount of growth, and as a result, their tax rate is skewed more to residential, which is difficult because we have to do overrides. And the other communities are a little different because of their tax rate.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Next question. Do you believe the legislature has done enough to improve transparency? You were mentioning the transportation. Anyway, transparency around the MBTA pension fund. And please be as specific and concrete as possible in your response.
Well, that's very interesting because both Senator Brownsberger and I have understand the pension system and understand what's going on. Just to give you a little background, I was a PERAC commissioner, Public Employee Retirement Administration commissioner mm-hmm. for 10 years. And in that time, we actually were trying to force the MBTA retirement system to report to us. We were the oversight committee. So I believe that the MBTA should be overseen and have more transparency in their public pension system. But the courts have said differently. The courts have said that the MBTA is a private sector, is private sector. They're under Social Security, and their pension system is different. Back in the early 1900s, there were a lot of public transportation systems that got taken over. So I think, yes, we should have more transparency. I think that I don't agree with the courts on it, because I believe that if something happens and we have to bail out the pension system, it's the taxpayers that will be paying. And so that we've done some aspects to make sure that they come forth with their information and what they're doing in their pension system. But I think they should be no different than any of the other 104 pension systems in the state. There should be transparency there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Excuse me, as you have already alluded to, the Commonwealth's transportation infrastructure is critical in supporting our economy. What are your priorities for supporting that infrastructure, and how would you fund such initiatives?
Yeah, well, I supported the governor's proposal on transportation in raising enough revenue to have $1 billion in transportation repairs. One of the main reasons, when I go out to the communities of Burlington and Lexington and Billerica and Woburn, more so than Arlington. Arlington's a different issue. I hear from the people in Arlington because of the Alewife, the Red Line, and to make sure that they want trains that will run so that they can get to work. They want to be able to get in and out of the city. But in those other communities, they also, it's very important to the businesses that people can get to work. And I think that's something that the average taxpayer really doesn't understand. And I don't mean to, I'm not belittling the average taxpayer, but they have to understand that if companies can't get their people back and forth from work, the number one issue for them is they want an educated workforce and they want a good transportation system. If they can't do it here in the greater Boston area, they'll go to North Carolina, or they'll go to South Carolina, or they'll go to other parts of the country where that's not going to happen. So we need to make sure that our public transportation is working properly. That means making sure that our 40-year-old Red Line cars are replaced, that our 40-year-old Green Line cars are replaced, that we have a dependable system where people can make sure when they get on that train they can get to work, or when people get on the road that they're not going to be stuck in traffic for an hour getting to their high-tech businesses on 128. And I think in the other piece that a lot of the companies say is they want to make sure that their people can get to work easily.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Do you think the towns and cities in your district are fairly represented in terms of the local aid budget? And if elected, what changes would you support, if any?
Well, I think that Arlington is it's difficult because when they look at the formulas, Arlington comes up with a formula that it's a somewhat wealthy community. What I don't think they consider is the ability for growth, and so that I think there's an overdependence on the residential tax, where there are a lot of blue collar workers in Arlington that are just middle class people that are just struggling to make ends meet. So I don't agree with their formula of local aid. I think that it's skewed in a way that even though the data from the DOR would show that we're doing well, I think that we've I have met with both DOR, the Secretary of Finance, and also the Governor's Office to look at that formula to see if we can change that formula to take into consideration that our ability to grow in Arlington is not as great as some other communities. And when you look at, I think the other important piece is when you look at the amount of money that is brought in from the 128 area, including the 5 communities I represent, a tremendous amount of money is put into the treasury of the state that helps the whole state. And I think that in some cases that has to be considered. So I will continue to fight for additional local aid for our communities and make sure that we have the money for Chapter 70 for school finance, for school and general government.
Mm-hmm. Do you support or oppose the ongoing expansion of government surveillance and the collection of telephone and electronic communications from Americans? And please explain your reasoning. Well,
haven't given it a tremendous amount of thought, to be honest with you. I have, clearly we have some concerns about that in these days and age. If you have a telephone, a GPS, or anything else, your privacy. We have to look at the whole issue of privacy in a different way. I'm a little apprehensive of giving government more tools to be able to invade in our privacy. But I think we have to look at, some of these issues are just so new. When you look at, I was just reading yesterday in the paper that people were concerned about the Easy Pass and the government being able to see where you're coming and going. I've never even thought of that, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. Or our cell phones, or our access to the different records. When we just did the recent gun bill, I was concerned that we were giving too much power to the police chiefs to be able to make a determination in people's lives without a due process. I feel the same way when we start looking at the records of people's privacy records. When do we start losing our liberties? So, not that I'm a libertarian, but in those issues, I kind of feel that it's important to make sure that we protect our liberties.
Well, thanks for sharing your views on that. And finally, what strategies would you use for working with members of other parties and with others of opposing views? And what experience do you have implementing these strategies?
Well, in a lot of different issues, I think that we can take, in the Massachusetts State Senate, we work closely with the other party, with the Republicans. I've worked with the minority leader, Bruce Tower, on many issues. Veterans issues. I was the chair of the Senate chair of Veterans. Veterans is a bipartisan issue. We've worked on closely to make sure that we've made Massachusetts the #1 state on veterans affairs. But that's done bipartisan. We just did a gun bill that was bipartisan. Both sides came together to make sure that we've done a gun bill where no one thought that could happen, but it did in Massachusetts, and we just passed it, and the governor just signed it yesterday. I think in Massachusetts, we've worked very closely with the other side, and there's a lot of different issues we can agree on, and some that we can't agree on. And I think that's really not a bad way to govern. Sometimes you read in the paper that they try to put this splinter or this split. This is not Washington, D.C. In Massachusetts, we have gone through one of the worst downturns in recessions in the area, and we've come out of it better than any state because we've worked together.
That's great. Thank you, and that concludes the questions portion of the interview. You now have 1 minute for a closing statement.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for inviting me on the show and giving me the opportunity to talk about some of the things that I think are really important. And I think we have to continue to make sure that we provide the opportunities for every citizen in the state to make it. I want to ask the citizens from my district, the 4th Middlesex District, Arlington, Burlington, Billerica, Lexington, and Woburn, to continue to have faith in me and to vote for me on Election Day so I can go back to Beacon Hill and continue to work for every citizen, whether they're rich, poor, middle class, or not, and continue to give people the right opportunities. And I think that I know that I will continue to do that in their best interest. So thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you. We do want to thank Mr. Donnelly for participating in our conversation. And please make your voice count by voting at the state primary on September 9th. For Arlington Public News, this is James Milan. Thanks for joining us.